Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to Sculpting Part 2. So let's just go ahead and pick up right where we left off. So let's go ahead and look at the concept here really quick before we get going. All right, so you can see in here that, we have a few dings and dents along the way. For the most part, you can see that the model is fairly clean. Like there's not a whole lot of necessary sculpting to do. That doesn't mean we have to make it stay very clean, but it's just something to be aware of, before you start to sculpt. But you can see in here, I know this is like more of a painted effect, but you can kind of see, if I go ahead and just get my handy dandy tool out here, that we have all these like tiny micro lines going in here. You see that a lot of the times with the stylized art with, like World of Warcraft, probably League of Legends are always the two that I jump to. They have like this sort of defined metal sort of shine to them. So I'm going to try to incorporate that if I can in the sculpt. If I can't get it in the sculpt, we will certainly be able to get that, later on in the texturing phase. So that's just something that I'm going to go ahead and try to do. But I think for now, we could try to hit these sort of dings in the sword, since that's pretty much the most obvious thing first. Okay, so let's get some dings in here. So I'm going to go ahead and use the trim smooth border to start. This may not work super well, but we'll try it. Just going to make a couple of marks in here. I think that should work. So don't worry about being super clean right now. We're going to go back and clean up some of these lines, but I'm just going to go through and just kind of make just some slight dings, and obviously keeping everything very subtle. Something like that looks pretty good. Maybe add maybe a smaller ding down here. Maybe like a skinnier one. Just something like that. So you can see that there's all these like leftover marks in here, and sometimes I don't mind it, but overall, if I'm doing stylized work, I want everything to look really clean. So I'm going to use the orb flatten edge brush, and this is just really great to go through and basically just kind of smooth everything out and like kind of flatten it out just a little bit. It works really, really well for that. So I'm using combinations of the Alt key to kind of raise certain areas up and lower them. And we can always just kind of come in and just kind of smooth out some of that stuff with our smooth. So see how that just reads as like almost a perfect nick? So that is what we're going for. Everything looks like it's intentionally done, right? It doesn't look like anything it was accidentally put there. But that doesn't mean you can't have happy accidents when you're doing stuff like this, There we go, just like that. So now it just looks like it got, kind of perfectly just kind of dinged just a little bit, So now I'm going to move on to the other side. Let's go ahead and just look over here, and we'll just kind of ding up here. The important thing we want to do when we're doing this side of the blade is to make sure that we don't have, repeating damage on this side. So we want to keep it a little bit asymmetrical. It'll make it stand out and be a little bit more interesting. And we'll just kind of put one, maybe like a bigger little chunk missing right here. There we go. And we'll just make a smaller little one right down here. Not too bad. All right, now back to the orb flatten edge. We're just going to go and just clean this up just like before. So something that I've done in the past and something that I kind of like, you can see it's slightly in here, is you make these sort of like concentric like circles. So when you're kind of smoothing things out, I'm going in a circle, and you see how it's just creating more circles. So I do kind of like that. It looks very intentional and like, it just kind of looks pretty cool. But, I think for the purpose of doing it on the blade, I don't know if it works super well because you have to think if this blade is getting used and they're swinging it around, then it's probably, getting damaged from making contact with, from hitting something. So you probably wouldn't see a damage like that. But this is stylized, so who knows? Maybe that's exactly what would happen with this sword. But, just always thinking about stuff like that. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. So the next thing we could probably do is we could probably start working on some of these edges. And I think what we could do, I'll use another tool here, something I haven't really used yet, is the planer brush. So you can access that by hitting BPL. Now the reason I like the planer brush is because it makes the most crisp, clean cuts that you'll ever be able to make in here, without using like the clip curve. So basically, if you kind of have to make the brush a little bit bigger than you think you do, because if I go in here, kind of small, and I start to kind of do this, you see how it did something, but it's not really that noticeable. It's kind of hiding from us a little bit. So you just gotta have to make the brush a little bit bigger. And then obviously you don't want to go in super hard, but just kind of slightly go in just like that. You see how it just created like a really, really smooth, like clean cut. So you can just kind of go in here and just kind of, hit the edges a little bit. I'm just tapping, right? Just tapping a little bit. You don't want to go in and, smash up the edges that much. But, one thing that you don't want to do, I think with a lot of edges, is these corner pieces up here. It is tempting to want to go through and sculpt on them, because for me, I love sculpting on corners and edges. But just I wouldn't do anything with this because, this is part of, what the silhouette is. It's, what helps make this whole piece really work. So we just won't hit that. And just go in here and just kind of ding a little bit of that. Yeah. And then I really do just like to go in with the orb flatten brush, just kind of flatten out some of these edges again. And one of the reasons why this matters, besides just keeping it clean, kind of back up here. So you see this little, it's kind of hard to see, but it's like this little small kind of edge right there. So if I left something like this here, and I went through the whole process and I baked all my maps out, well, this is going to be part of the curvature map. And that's something that I do end up using when I'm, doing my texturing. And I don't want to have a curve right there. So I always think about that as well, thinking about the future and thinking about, how to prepare myself to, just for some success, right? Okay, I think that works. So yeah, the planer brush is a good one. That's definitely one of my favorites to do, like really clean cuts. But again, like I'm kind of just looking at the concept, and I don't want to go overboard. I really don't want to sculpt, too many dings and dents, because then the sculpt's going to look really, just kind of muddy. And it's, part of the appeal for something like this is just how clean and crisp and cut it is. Okay. So next, let's go ahead and we'll work on this like upper portion of the blade. We'll do the same thing. I'm gonna use the trim smooth border this time and just kind of go in and just kind of hit some of these corners here. Because corners, especially right here, would be more likely to get hit. So that's gonna be where that damage would be. Okay. And of course, I don't see anything in the concept about having damage up here, but I think it would be a cool idea to have some of that. It just kind of ties everything in together. And, if this is the front of the blade, probably going to be doing a lot of, stabbing or whatever you're going to do with it. So probably going to have some sort of wear. Okay, yeah, it's not too bad. So next, I think what I'd like to do is let's do sort of like a little bit of a damage pass on the actual metal itself, like the actual like blade right here. And one thing we could do is use the H polish brush. And let's actually start here on this side. Now, I've been kind of testing this out and just seeing how this works, and it does work pretty well. So right now, I think, you know, the blade is really, really clean, and I think what we could do is just kind of go in with the H polish, just really like subtly, and we're just going to kind of tap down a little bit and just kind of create just some like irregularity, you know, within the actual like surface area. And what that's going to do is like, it'll be so subtle, but when the light kind of flashes over it, you'll be able to see, you know, that there's some marking there, and it's just going to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. I think now that I'm looking at this, it's kind of bothering me. I think I pushed in too much on this side, so I'm just going to take the H polish and just kind of soften this up just a bit. It was just bothering me. There we go. Okay, now back to this part. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go along the entirety of the blade down here, and just kind of go through. And you can see that I'm going at sort of like a diagonal, just trying to follow, like, kind of like following this edge just a bit. You know how this line is angled up this way. And I'm not gonna do it. I don't want to do it like evenly, so I'm gonna come down here and just start to make those same marks down here just a bit, pretty subtly. Okay, and what we can do is probably just do just a little bit of that on this area here and see how that looks. Yeah, not too bad. Okay, now the next step we could take with this is let's use the trim dynamic brush. And then I'm just going to basically go in. I might have to lower the intensity a bit. And I'm just going to kind of subtly go in, holding Alt to push the geo towards me. And just kind of like, it's almost like erasing what we did a little bit, but it's just kind of sharpening up by raising it, just kind of sharpening everything up a little bit more. I know it's really hard to see because I'm, you know, making this really subtle, but there we go. It's kind of, you know, getting that effect that I mentioned earlier about, you know, how World of Warcraft or League kind of has that like metal look to it. It's kind of doing the same thing. Again, that would be more like reinforced probably when we get to the texturing phase later. I'm going to actually raise the intensity back. And just kind of slightly, just keep going over this just a bit. I may have gone a little bit too heavy-handed with it, but I think that's okay. Don't worry about this backside either. I know that this is something that I was thinking about, but that's okay because obviously we only care about one side. We're going to be eventually duplicating this side over. Okay, not too bad. I'm liking that so far. Now, I think what we could do to sort of help finish this off, I know that the concept is like slightly cleaner, but, you know, rules are meant to be broken, so we're going to make it a little bit dirtier. So I'm going to use one of the orb brushes. You can use like an orb/02. The intensity is down just a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of go in, and every once in a while, just kind of add in, notice how I'm starting the alpha pull like at the corner here at the edge. Just going to do that, just kind of go through Maybe make the lengths a little, just give it a little bit of variety every once in a while. And we'll just kind of cut some of this. Just add some cool little dings, some scratches, as all swords need. And we can always go back through and just kind of erase some of them if we don't like them. And maybe we could vary up the size. Let's use a different one. Maybe we could use, see, maybe the slash clean. And we'll just kind of take the intensity down a bit. So again, just trying to add some, some asymmetry as I'm doing this. Yeah, I think that's working out okay. It's not too bad. So let's go ahead and do it to the other side. Actually, before, let's go ahead and just add a nice little cut right there. Something like that. So again, let's take our H polish brush and let's just kind of go through and we'll do the same treatment to this side. Try not to go too heavy-handed. Okay, and once again, trim dynamic, holding Alt, and we're just going to kind of go through on the bottoms of these and just kind of see if we can sharpen them up and erase some of it. All right, so now let's just keep going ahead and we'll do the slashes again. Trying to keep it a little bit asymmetrical. And I think that's something I didn't do correctly on this side, was all of the lengths of these are pretty even, and I think doing a couple that are a little bit smaller, that's probably what should have been done, so I can go ahead and address that. But first, we'll go ahead and just keep adding in a little bit more of these. So let's just try and reverse some of these. So I'm going to go through, maybe we could go through with the trim smooth border and just see if we can just slightly just erase some of this. It's okay if you're making some marks like I am, like it's not a big deal. Just take our H polish brush and just kind of slowly smooth that around. Not bad. There's probably at least one more. I think what I'll do is I'll get rid of this one right here. Just like that. Again, just using trim smooth border and holding Alt just to kind of fill in some of those little gaps there. Yeah, I think that should work out just fine. Now, I think I want to go through and make some marks on these edges here because it's like obviously too clean. Like when everything else is kind of getting dinged up, we just kind of want to go through and just kind of add a couple of nicks. The other thing I could mention too, Orb's got another brush. It is the Orb clay tubes. And this is kind of nice because it just allows you to go in and just kind of make kind of like little circular holes. It's kind of like the clay buildup brush. I think this one's a little bit more aggressive though in terms of like how intense it is. So that is definitely something I like with these brushes. Okay, and then we can always just kind of go over and just slightly smooth where we just put these marks in, just to help help it not be super sharp. And then let's use the flatten brush, and we'll just kind of flatten that out a bit. And we'll go through this side. Just kind of do the same thing. It kind of helps with scale, honestly, adding like little smaller dings. Okay. Looks pretty good so far. So let's go ahead and let's venture up to the top here and let's work on this a little bit. So we're going to do the same treatment, just like we did. And I'm just going to start with the H polish. And it does help, like as you're doing this, just sort of, wiggle the model around just a little bit, and you'll be able to see kind of what sort of marks you've been making. Yeah, I think something like that should work out pretty well. Okay. And then let's take the trim dynamic and we'll just kind of do the same thing, holding Alt. And just kind of backing up just a little bit and getting just a little bit of a look at this. So honestly, now that I'm seeing this, I'm noticing that on the left side, at least, I think there's too many marks. I'm going to go through and just erase some. Okay, so I think that should work. So again, let's go through with our slash brush and we'll just start to make some cuts here. Now I'm gonna, take a lesson from what I just did and just kind of do a little bit smaller next to maybe a little bit bigger marks. I think that should help. Yeah, I think that works. Just do a few more and let's switch it up a bit and we'll just do some thicker ones. Yeah, I think that actually, I like what that's doing at the top there. I'm still not like 100% super happy with this side of the blade, to be honest. I think it just, I went a little heavy-handed, so it just stands out quite a bit. But that's okay. That's nothing I can't fix. Just kind of go through and just kind of clean this up a bit. There, I think that's already better. There. So actually what I want to do before I head off of the blades is I'm going to go through and just add the clay tubes brush again. And let's just kind of make some like smaller little dings here, just like that. Maybe we could do like one here. And I think that works pretty well. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. That turned out well. Okay, so now that we have sort of the blade taken care of, I should mention, because in the concept, it's like this sort of blue material that's kind of right here. It's like glowing a little bit. So as far as sculpting goes, there's really not much we're going to do here just because it's probably going to be more of an emissive effect anyway. It's not going to have any sort of sculptural effect. I mean, I think if we really wanted to, we could, but just a little tip, when you do an emissive, if it's, fairly bright, like what we're probably going to have, it will kind of mask out any sort of sculpting or normal map information you have. It really depends on like what what you're doing, but just in my experience, emissive will usually always just sort of wipe out whatever sort of normal you've done. So just keep that in mind. All right, so moving on, let's go to sort of this like gold coppery kind of metal. We're gonna do pretty much the same kind of treatment that we did for the blade, and we're gonna just kind of apply that to this part. So let's actually just kind of start out with our H polish again. And let's just kind of, what we're gonna do is just do the same thing, just kind of lightly come in here and just kind of make these marks here. And like, I think like it's gonna help every once in a while if one of them you're like a little bit lighter handed, and then a couple of them you're heavier handed. I think that could work. And I definitely could use symmetry here if I wanted to, but I think just doing it fairly uneven is going to look a little bit more believable. Okay, so then what we can do now is we can take our pinch brush and we can just kind of pinch in right on these edges here. We'll just kind of pinch that. Just like so. And we might actually need to do these fairly closer to one another. The sort of like indents, if you will. There we go. And I think we should go like right up, like if you're going back and forth here, sculpt right in between, right until you hit the edge, and then sculpt back. I think that's going to help sort of sell this effect a little bit more. Okay. There we go. I think that's going to look pretty nice. So again, let's go ahead and get our pinch brush out, and let's just kind of keep pinching this stuff together just a bit more. And then we could just kind of go over, this entire area right here and just sort of start to smooth it, because it doesn't need to be like in your face, obvious. I think that even like right here, what we've done is probably a little bit too much. So I'm just going to go through and hold Alt and just kind of fill in some of this. Just want it to be nice and subtle. And then I think we could probably, I don't know if we could do with like less, but I'm just going to keep kind of smoothing this out a bit more. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just sculpting with the H polish. That's what I'm doing, just to kind of bury a little bit of my work, so to speak. So I think that might work. When it comes time to doing the texturing, what I could always do is like lower the opacity of the normal map, but that's something I can talk about a little later. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the opposite side, just kind of, maybe we could do a little bit heavier handed towards the bottom on this side. Just kind of skip a few. And you're going to see me, I'm going to do this quite a bit, is like zoom in and out, because I'm always checking what everything looks like, as a whole, as opposed to what something looks like on its own. Might actually increase the intensity. That way I don't have to like go back and forth so many times. And I might just come back through here as I'm working and just kind of start to erase some of the work. There we go. And let's grab our pinch brush. Actually, real quick, before I get ahead of myself, let's continue down here. Okay, now we can get our pinch brush out. And we'll just start to pinch some of these edges. And like before, we can go through with our H polish and just kind of subtly sculpt over what we just did. Just kind of soften everything. I think that kind of hits the effect pretty well, I think. Okay, now to kind of do some more of that down here, let's see if we could actually try, maybe like right in here, we can get some of that effect going on. I'm not going to do it everywhere though. I'm just going to do it like in some areas. Just like this. And then like right in here, what we could do is just kind of go through with the H polish and just kind of make some subtle like dents, just to, you know, show some like uneven surface. Something kind of like this. And again, just kind of constantly, I'm going to go through here again and just kind of keep working this area out. There we go. And like before, we're going to follow this edge right here, and we're going to do the same thing. So that's kind of the trick. When the area starts to like flatten out, like you see how I'm kind of following this angle as I'm going. And so technically this line would be straight up and down, but we don't want to do that. So we're just going to kind of add in some like dings right along here. Okay, like that. I think that's going to work just fine. So I think overall it's coming together. I'm just kind of finessing everything. There we go. Awesome. All right, so what I might just keep symmetry on for these pieces because I don't think it's going to matter too much. We can just give this a whirl, see how that works. Better turn my intensity up a bit. Yeah, I think that actually worked out better than I thought. So now I'm just going to take the pinch brush and just kind of start to work in some of these edges. Yeah, I think that actually works pretty nicely. I think this one actually turned out better than it did up here, to be honest. So I'm not too sure if I want to actually try to redo this one. I'm going to try it. Let's actually I'm going to go back really quick here. Nothing wrong with going back and redoing some work. Because I think what the problem is, now that I'm looking at it, so with this one, it just works because I think how like the size of the marks I made, and they're kind of like really subtle, and I think we just went way too small. So let's just kind of go through, and actually I'm going to go against what I said. We're going to do a little symmetry. Just kind of go through here. There we go. Maybe a little bit smaller, something like this. Yeah, there's just really nothing against, don't ever be afraid to undo something. Some of the habits I used to fall into was like, I just did not want to do work over again. If I'm like, well, I just laid down my brushwork and, it's kind of okay, but that means that you should probably redo it. Because you're most likely going to do it better the second time, even the third and the fourth time, it's just going to get better. So yeah, you see how much better that looks? Like it starts to match this down here. Way better in my opinion. So I'm just going to go through and just kind of keep working this a little bit. Yeah, much better. I'm way happy with that. And now to kind of break the symmetry up, I'm going to go through and just kind of like, maybe just sculpt a little bit on like one side more than the other. Just to help that. And then we can go in the middle and just kind of add in some dings. And we don't want to forget this little area right here. Just like that. But yeah, I still think that even going through and just kind of slowly sculpting out some of this, making it a little bit less obvious, is going to be way better in the end. All right, yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. So now let's just go through with a trim smooth border and let's just kind of like sculpt, add some dings here and there. Just kind of bring this thing to life a little bit. And again, I'd be kind of cautious on sculpting like on these edges here. I mean, if you want to sort of help, retopologize any sort of silhouetting that you want to do, be my guest. But for now, I think I'm just going to stick with just doing some subtle hits. Just like that. And we'll just kind of flatten some of this stuff out. There we go. We could probably, so if you see right here, so this is something that I just caught. So if I go and look at this, you see the damage size right here compared to here and here. I mean, these two damage marks are the same size, but these two aren't. And, obviously I can't go making a mark this big on something like this because, the scale would be off a little bit, but I think we should make dings that are fairly similar in size. So that's why it's important to zoom back out. I think this actually works pretty well. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do the same thing to this. All right, so now that we have this, obviously everything's looking very even, and we don't want that. So let's go ahead and turn symmetry off. And just like before, we'll just kind of go through and we'll just start to sculpt out some of the marks that we made on some of the sides and leave them on the other. And I think overall these might be a little too strong. So just like, let's try to actually use the flatten brush, and let's go through with a low intensity and just kind of lightly just brush over everything all at once. Just lower its intensity a bit. There we go. See how much better that looks? So like you can kind of see it out here. Like it's still fairly noticeable. It's nowhere near as bad as it just was. So maybe just kind of continuously, just kind of go over that again. Okay, so yeah, that's looking a lot better. Let's go ahead and once again, let's grab our trim smooth border and do some damage. Just doing a little bit on the corners here. Again, we don't have to add damage everywhere. Just, you know, where it makes sense. Right, so usually on the edges of things, if you think about like, if you were to just drop this on the ground, what would get damaged first, right? If you think about, you know, questions like that, it just helps to just reinforce when you start adding marks down. You're like, okay, well, I probably wouldn't get scratched in here, in that little crevice, just because, well, you know, why would it, right? It's pretty protected, kind of hard to reach. So. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I think one thing I forgot to do is on this part here, let's just kind of go through and I'm going to soften out some of these just to add some of that asymmetry. Not too much though. This one's already, you know, fairly subtle, so I don't need to really go and do too much to it. But I think that is going to be just fine. Okay. Awesome. That's looking pretty cool. Okay, so if we want, we can kind of just change gears here for a second, because I know we've been doing basically, you know, mostly metal, but, you know, that's just kind of what happens with a sword like this, right? We can kind of do some of the leather here. Now, there isn't a whole lot that really needs to be done here, because to be honest, I think that just leaving, you know, leather straps that, you know, it's a very bold, like all of these are very bold shapes. And I think kind of leaving them that way and not doing a whole lot, I think is really going to just kind of like, I don't know, make it really clean, because I really love clean assets when it comes to stylized work. So Um, let's just go ahead and do it's kind of a similar treatment that we've been doing before. Let's just kind of try and take our H polish brush, the intensity a little bit up, and let's just kind of go, instead of going this way, right? We won't go left and right. Let's just go up and down. And I'm just going to kind of subtly do a couple of marks here and there, and I'm going to smooth them as I go. So just kind of going up and down just a little bit, just to add a little bit of interest, just a little bit of sculpted mark. All right, now let's just see how that looks. I think I might want to sculpt out some of this. It's okay if you want to go left and right too. There's nothing saying you can't. A lot of this to me is like, you can see how subtle this is. That's what I'm going for. Like I'm not making marks like this, right? Like I don't need to make giant marks because again, it's about you know, selling the idea that it's leather, or at least I'm assuming that this material would be leather. And so when you zoom out and you can kind of see just some of the surface areas broken up a bit. That's basically like the extent of what I want to do with this. It kind of shows that it's worn a little bit of a like worn out leather, that it's been, you know, grabbed and gripped a bit. So I'm just going to go through here and just kind of make some marks again. And it's really funny. A lot of people are just, I hear a lot, it's just like, oh, how did you do that? And it's like, well, I literally just grabbed like an H polish brush and I just kind of scattered it across the surface of the mesh. It's not magic. And then, yeah, obviously, you know, just going through and really smoothing it out, you know, just adding, you know, more softness to it. So one thing we can do is use our what is it, orb clay brush, and we can kind of go through. I'm going to lower the intensity and switch this to Z sub. That's just going to make it so I can just press in and not have to hold Alt. So I'm going to go through and just kind of add along this kind of edge here, because that's where something would probably get damaged. And just kind of add a little bit of dots, a little bit of damage in here, maybe not on the surface. Just like that. And obviously keeping, you know, pretty asymmetrical. We don't want to add dots like everywhere. Otherwise that's just going to be really distracting. You're going to be like, what? Why are those there? Yeah, I think that can actually work. Okay, so let's just kind of go through and we'll do the same treatment along here. This is just something I've discovered as I've done stylized art, kind of, you know, worked professionally, is that, you know, in my opinion, what I like, the best stylized art, it does have sculpting. Like you definitely have like a decent amount of sculpting to do, but it's the ones that are just so subtle, and it just has like that finesse and that care that people put into it. When I can't tell that something is sculpted, that's when I know that I really like it. It's something that I've had to learn quite a bit. So I'm just going to kind of keep going through here. Now, one thing you might be asking yourself is, you know, well, why don't you use like a leather texture or something? Even if it's stylized, like why not use like a leather texture? And that's something that's totally viable. You can do that. I think that the reason I choose to not do sort of micro detail like that when I'm doing sculpts like this is because, well, for instance, professionally, if you decided to go through and sculpt in a leather texture on the actual the mesh here, you know, that's all fine and dandy. But then as soon as someone comes up to you after they've, you know, maybe you went through the whole process and you sculpted it and then you painted it in Substance Painter, you textured, and maybe your lead or an art director comes up and says, oh, well, that's weird. Why is that leather? That should be, I don't know, whatever other material it could be. And then you're just like, oh man, well, now I have to go back and redo the sculpt. And you're not going to want to. So handling a lot of that stuff in like Substance Painter is what I would recommend you do, because you can easily just remove a texture and add like a smart material or something, instead of having to, add all of that back in the sculpt. And I know this from life lessons. I have had to do this several times, and I finally was like, you know what? I'm not going to sculpt micro detail anymore, because more than likely it might get changed, or it will be asked to be changed. So, all right, so I'm just going to go through here again with the clay buildup, or I'm sorry, the clay tubes. And, I don't have to add dings on every single piece of leather. I think, you just don't need to do that per se. But yeah, I think maybe adding a couple of like bigger, making these a little bit bigger to help with scale, that'll be good. Something kind of like that. Now, another trick that you could do, you can see that I've been using this orb clay madcap, and my eyes have gotten really used to that. That's all I've been kind of looking at. So, one thing that I highly recommend you do is switch matte caps halfway through, because, this matte cap in particular, it does pick up on the really subtle edges, versus, if let's just kind of use the, my startup is just like the matte cap gray. So if I just switch to that, you see how now at this stage, like I can kind of see those edges a little bit, but they're not as like in your face. And so I just think it's a good idea to switch, because it's kind of like looking at a fresh, canvas again. So that is just something I recommend. I'm just going to kind of go up. This is still kind of bugging me. I think that I went a little bit too hard with some of these. I think we can kind of tone back some of the ridges just a little bit. Okay. So now what we can do is we can kind of keep going through, and this is, one of those gold coppery pieces. So again, this is a lot of the same. I'm just going to go through and do the same thing here with the edge highlights. And I don't have to do it on every single edge. I'm just going to kind of go through and pick the areas I want to do. And something you could do, and I never do this, not really sure why, but how I modeled in Maya and I had different colors. You could do that in here as well. I think that for the sculpting, it just kind of interferes with, what I'm seeing. I think the colors can be kind of deceptive in a way. That's just my opinion. You can totally feel free to go through and, add colors to everything. I've never done that. I think partially because it also just takes time to do that. And I know that if the colors work in Maya, then they're going to work in here. So just kind of going through, I'm just going to kind of ding up this handle just a little bit, or whatever this is. I actually don't know what this is. A cool decorative piece. So every once in a while, just going through and just kind of dinging up some of these just to add a little bit of interest. Always about adding that interest. And it just, you really don't need much. Just a couple of dings. Okay, so again, this is like the same material right here. This would be more of that, sort of coppery bronze. So we'll do the same treatment. Now this would be pretty unlikely to get dinged, to be honest. Like, just the way it's positioned, unless someone actually smacked this with another sword, it's probably gonna not have a lot of damage to it. So I will just add a teeny tiny little dent, just for some amount of like surface breakup. There we go. And then what we can do is with this piece here, this is going to be really similar. It's kind of unfortunate. I know most of the materials, it's just basically metal and leather, but that's what swords are basically made out of. So it's okay. It just gives me plenty of opportunity to, reteach the technique of doing this. So I'm just going to kind of go through and do the same thing here again. Now I'm going to switch back to the matte cap, just because I want to be able to see those edges, and when I can't see them, I'm always afraid that I'm going to sculpt a little bit too intense with it. So that would be the reason. And you know what? I actually don't think I can use symmetry on this now that I'm realizing. I don't think this is actually perfectly symmetrical. So not a big deal. Just something I'm glad I realized now instead of later. This kind of almost reminds me of like obsidian, like the material, like the rock. All right, so let's just kind of go through here. I'm just going to kind of subtly, just like before, just go through and kind of clean up some of the areas I don't like. And then let's go ahead and add, just a couple of dings, because this definitely would be getting, if you were hitting someone with this end, you'd definitely scratch it. Which reminds me, actually, let's go ahead and get our slash brush out. And we're just going to add a couple of like cuts here and there. I think just to help reinforce this would be good. And let's get out a bigger one. There we go. And what we could always do with the handle, because we didn't really add too much to it, we could add a couple of slashes to it if we wanted, just like, again, very subtle. Maybe we could add a little bit more intensity to it, just to show like the history of it being a little old, a little worn. And again, I don't really want to add too much. Maybe something like this. Okay, so I did gloss over this little piece, but again, there's really not too much that I would do this. I'm not even going to do the metal trick to it, just because, it doesn't really work, to have us do that. So let's just take our trim smooth border, and we're just going to kind of go through and just kind of ding up some of these edges a bit. And because this is so small, what I might do is let's just grab the planer brush again, and every once in a while we'll just go through and just kind of add a nice little ding, just to break up a little bit of this. Now again, I'm not going on every single one, because that would just be pretty overkill, I think. Just kind of like every second one will, ding up a little bit. And I don't even think I'm going to add like any kind of little dings or anything, on these edges, just because it's so small. I don't think it really matters too much. We could do probably some stuff with this as well, this kind of piece right here. Let's just kind of do the same treatment with the H polish brush. Just kind of subtly put that in there. And actually, I would end up cutting that in half anyway, so maybe something just kind of like this, adding a little bit of texture variety in here. Yeah, I think that looks kind of nice. Okay, so I think the last sort of material on here would be like the little, tiny gemstones that we have. I actually remembered that we do have like, let's see if I can see it, like this little like metal holder thing right here. I probably don't need to really do too much with that because it's such a thin and insignificant little piece. So I'll just kind of leave these pieces alone here. And honestly, as far as like jewels go, I don't know if I'm actually gonna do any kind of sculpting on these, just because I think I want to leave them, just kind of fairly simple. We could actually go through maybe with the planer brush and just kind of make a couple of like cuts here and there if we wanted to. Let's see. I just kind of went through. Sort of almost like a diamond. Actually, I kind of like this. That's kind of nice. I might leave this. So again, I just like took the planer brush, sized it up nice and big, and then I'm literally just kind of touching it, every once in a while, just kind of, getting those marks in there. And I actually like that quite a bit. I'm glad I decided to go with it because it looks almost like, I don't know, just like a cut jewel. And we could do the same for these stones here on the side. Just kind of go through and maybe a little bit more subtle. Yeah, because I know in the concept, again, like they're a little bit, like they're just rounded. And I would just copy this one over to the side anyway, so I'm not going to do the one on the left. Actually, I might as well. Why not? And one in the middle. There we go. So those just look a lot more like jewels now, like a little bit of like a crystal or something. So yeah, I'm actually a big fan of that. And then I could move these down and match like more of that shape, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think overall this is looking pretty good. All right, so that kind of wraps everything up. It looks like the sculpt pretty much just kind of came to a finish right there. It's not a lot. Like once you can see, once I got going with, the technique of the H polish and going through and just kind of adding in all those little details. And I have a method of, obviously going about things, right? Like first it's, going in with the H polish, then, adding detail on top and then on top. And so once you have that sort of order of operation, and you kind of use that method to approach like all of your sculpts, things will just go really, really quick because you'll see a material, you'll be like, okay, I'm gonna do the surface area, and then I'll do the edge wear, and then I'll do this, and then you just kind of move on from there. So this is basically how I approach a lot of my sculpts, if not all of them, especially if I'm doing a prop, like a hero prop like this. It's giving it a lot of extra care. So I hope you all enjoyed this video series. I can't wait to see all the sculpts that you do with this. Hopefully you learned something. I look forward to creating more tutorials. I will probably end up doing a texturing tutorial on this if you would like to see that. So stay tuned for that. But until then, I will see you next time. All right, bye-bye.